So we've got a really nice mushroom down here. It's an edible, but it's one that we need to be very wary of when we come to picking these ones. This one's called an Orange Grisette. So we're in a birch woodland. We're surrounded by silver birch trees here. This is where this mushroom likes to live. If we were to go through some of the ID stages for this one, we'd say it's got a cap with a stem, and then we'd look underside and we'd say it's got gills. So it has gills in there, true gills. And then we went very far down into the base and actually digged a little bit. We'd see that this one is growing out of a sac or a vulva, which instantly should start putting off little alarm bells. We've got an Amanita. If we're starting to get used to mushrooms, this is one that's worth looking at, but maybe not picking for eating. Just because the Amanitas are one of those mushrooms we need to be very wary of. There's some seriously deadly toxic mushrooms in there, like the death cap. However, this one, the Orange Grisette, once cooked, is actually a really quite nice mushroom. As you can see, it's a decent size, the stem's edible, and when we find one, we'll usually find quite a few. If we look at this one from an idea point of view, yeah, we've got a cap, and one of the keys for the grisettes that you can see here is around the cap. As it starts to open up, it will be more domed when it's younger, and this one's quite bright orange, especially when it's younger. As it starts to open, we get these little striations. You've got little lines as the cap opens up. It's almost like you've opened up an umbrella and the edges of the umbrella just aren't big enough to be open, so they start to split and break apart, and you see the lines around the edge of the cap. And then if we were to look underside, we'd see that they've got gills that are white and they're free, so they don't touch the actual stem. It'll have a white spore print as well, so if we were to cut it across here, we'd take that cap and we'd put it on 2 pieces of paper. We'd do one piece of paper's black here, one's white. We'd put the cap on top of it in the middle, and then we'd leave a bowl or a glass or something on top so it doesn't dry out, and it'll drop its spores. Sometimes it might take overnight, but what this one does, it'll drop white spores. So on that piece of paper, it'd show up white spores on the black piece of paper. You won't see them very well on the white, but if it was coloured spores, then we'd see it on the white piece of paper. So it'll drop a white spore print, and then we've got the slender but long stem here. And one of the keys for this one, opposed to some of the other grisettes, is that it's got a snake skin pattern. So up the stem there, it looks like the skin of a snake. It's a little bit furry as well, actually, on the stem. And then we come down to the base. If we were to open it up, and this is where we kind of go against some of the myths of foraging mushrooms. Sometimes people say, oh, we should never take anything below the ground from the mushroom. But for this family and the Amanitas in general, I always think it's really important that we go down and we look at the base. So I always go in with my knife and I'll go down at least 5 or 6 centimetres and cut below the ground before I take it up. Because if all the mud comes up to here, I can't see that this one's growing in a sac or a vulva. But if I go from further down, cut down, pull it up, I can see that in the base here, there is a sac or vulva that this one's grown out of. And that entire mushroom, before it grew, would have been sat inside that sac, and then it would have popped and grown out from there. So some of your other Amanitas that grow out of a sac would grow up and you'd see the dots on top. So the classic one that we see is the red cap with white dots on top. But quite often with the grisettes, they don't hold the vulva, remnants of the vulva on the cap, so you very rarely see them with dots on top. They're usually quite smooth, like this one is here, and the vulva stays as a sac just at the bottom that the actual mushroom's grown out of. Like I say, this one's a nice edible, slightly underrated, but is really tasty. I'd slice it up, always be cooked before consuming, but that's that. This one, Orange Grisette. The potential ones that people could confuse this with are tawny grisette, or common grisette. We don't need to be particularly worried about those. You could potentially confuse it with a Caesar's mushroom as well, which is really orange on top. But they're all edible, so we don't need to worry about those ones. The main ones we need to be wary of are other Amanitas, so death caps, things like that. Once you get used to the Amanitas, there is some key differences, but to start with, I'd just steer clear of all of them. Obviously, I'd go through the stages for identification just to make sure I've got it and to build up your knowledge on them. But once you get more confident, yeah, really good one to head out and look for picking.